Oop. All right, guys, welcome back to the Mr. Gloat podcast. Now we are here to talk about professional boxing. Man, I overtalk so much after 40 to 50 minutes of the FIFA World Cup talking about all of these other divisions, talking about how they had that confederation thing. It's not the FIFA World Cup, but the FIFA Confederation, where they had 8 soccer teams, and most of them were from Asia, Africa, and USA and such. And some of them would make it to the finals, which makes competition exciting because at least we don't get to see the same countries perform in the finals all the time, even though Brazil won 4 of them. But still, you get to see the other teams play against them, which we don't see rarely. And talking about so much from all the craziness and such, I was just over the top of it. But the beauty about it is it is what it is. There's a lot of interesting things happening. I was going to talk about how Canada had a much better year, considering Canada only had 3 appearances in their entire life, one in 1986, which I have talked about that in another episode a while back. Them talking about how they were 0-3 in the 1986 Mexico games, and 4 years ago they did worse, from 24th place that year to over decades later to Equator 4 years ago, 0-3 again, and 31st place out of 32, only for them to make it to the round of 16. They made it to the tournament, made it to the round of 32, and made it to the round of 16. They lost, utterly bad. But again, that there just goes to show you, maybe there is some promises there. And I did talk about how the USA had their star player that scored 3 goals, and he was red card when they were playing in the round of 32 against Bosnia. And I did say to myself, if the outcome was different and their star player did not get red card out of the game, would the outcome betwixt them and Belgium would have been a completely different story? Or would the score would have been 4-1 either way? Maybe the score would have been 3-2 for Belgium. USA would have gotten a goal away from them, and they scored another goal, and they still would have lost. Or maybe some unbelievable thing would have happened, and they got lucked on by another goal and won 3-2 instead. And they would have went to Spain, and maybe they would have done horrible than anything else. Maybe they would have competed against Spain in the quarterfinals and utterly lost. Maybe not 2-1 like Spain did to Belgium, which made them in the semis. Or maybe USA would have gotten lucky with them as well and got to the semis, and they would have lost against France in the semifinals. That's what the thing about sports is all about. Sports brings that level of something unexpected could happen. And it could, but it just couldn't happen this year. And again, Mbappe and Lionel Messi are 2 dangerous players. They've been dangerous 4 years ago, and they're still dangerous this year. And that it just goes to show you. And they've won all 3 of their games in the groups. They've won their other last 3 games from the round of 32 to the quarters without any, problem. Like France dominated Sweden 3-0, 1-0 against Paraguay, 2-0 against Morocco. Morocco had no offensive. Argentina 3-2 on Cape Verde, shockingly, and 3-2 against Egypt. Okay, I don't know how they're not. That's kind of weird. And 3-1 against Switzerland, which they did do it on extra time, so they had to earn those last goals. But again, we've already talked about that, so let's not talk about it again. Again, I am going to talk about the semifinals on the 14th of July and the 15th. You know what? I will talk about the episode again until the 15th on Wednesday after the last game is over, because again, France versus Spain is on the 14th in Arlington, and Atlanta, England versus Argentina on the 15th, the next day. 14th, Spain, France, England on Argentina on the 15th of July. And after that, we'll have the third place finals in the Miami Gardens on the 18th of July, and East Rutherford on the 19th. So we have 1 week left. That's all I'm going to say about that. We'll keep the update until then, because I've already opened my big mouth. I've done a lot of stuff I regret saying, but you know what? we might as well finish it. But again, it's been 5 minutes since we talked about this episode. And while we're at it, I'll be right back in just a moment just to get a little bit of Starbucks. All right. Mocha. Anyway. All right. So I was going to talk about this heavyweight championship. In the last episode I did a few hours ago, but because the information on BoxRec has 4 matches that have already been updated on BoxRec, 2 of them were bare knuckle, 2 of them were pros, and there's a bunch of other fights that weren't released. I'm now refreshing the list right now to see, and as of right now, it's still the same thing. Ridiculous. So before we talk about the Murat Garcia versus Peter Kadiru, I do have a Paragraph Observer. It's not Wrestling Observer, but I do talk about any type of sport, whatever it is. And mostly it's boxing and other stuff. And even though I do keep 7 Paragraph Observer to myself as best we could to keep documents, I do have an interesting amount of understanding. And also, to let people know, on the 10th week of every episode, number 10s from the 10s, whether 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, on the even number of the 10s, I do talk about random stuff that's out of this world, not talked about, in my opinion. Let's not get to that. But there is one information I did talk about. So one person in a source I did wrote off a paragraph yesterday. Someone told me 4 days ago, before this fight, someone told me, and outside, he said the reason why Tony Yoka, the 2016 gold medalist, got pulled out of this fight with the WBA champion of Murat Garcia on the 11th is because when he was on to a training session, a kid stomped on his foot and then he pulled back, and that's how he threw out his back. And that's how he got his back injury. Now, to let you people know, that's a ridiculous story. Why would you even bring a child in a boxing? Well, I have been to some boxing gyms and other gyms from Planet Fitness, so there are children there. But you try to meet your star or a fan that you used to watch the Olympics and wish him good luck, but you have your child there and you want to see him win this champion, and the child accidentally stepped on Yoka's foot and he went ow and he just bent his back because he felt a huge pain. Is that what happened? Like, I'm no doctor, but I find that story to be fictional, and I don't even know where the guy got the information from, but it's kind of ridiculous. And I'm not going to tell who the person is because he's not online or something, and I don't want to. Again, he also was wearing a French flag. So he was a French person, but that does live here and supports him. So, and even though I'm part Canadian, so that right there does lead differences. But so a child stepped on Tony Yoka's foot, and I guess he went ow in French, and he put his back forward, and that's how he strained his back. He didn't do it that's how he pulled out of the fight? What? That's what he said. It's ridiculous. So Tony Yoka had a world title fight, and a little child cost him the fight. Whether it's fictional or facts, it's pretty interesting. But again, all that for a title fight going down the tube, it's weird because Tony Yoka had lost 3 pro fights. One against a Frenchman he had, one against Ryan Murray, who was the WBC Bridger weight, and another fighter who, again, and all those fights were dominated, but the judges gave the fight close by decision, and he had to take some time coming back, winning against some nobodies. He takes on a Russian boxer last year ago. He wins undefeated and wins another fight. Now he's back in the rankings. He was going to take against Lawrence Okali, and Lawrence Okali decided to take drugs. And now Yoka, this is the most ridiculous story I've ever heard, and it's so ridiculous. I don't know. It's the most ridiculousness, and I'm trying to find articles about that, but I just find the story to be fictional. But again, it's funny if you think about it. That's how Tony Yoka pulled out of the fight. It's ridiculous. I I what are we doing here? What the heck are we doing here? Oh boy, this world's ridiculous. Anyway, let me just read a couple more paragraphs of other information going on before we talk about the show. More news on our good old buddy Ronaldo Raleigh Romero. Since last year, he had the upset win against Ryan Garcia to become a two-weight class champion, and has stated that he is linked to the likes of Devin Haney with Conor Benn and Ryan Garcia for a rematch, as believing any of those fights could happen. However, a one-by-one of bouts fell by the wayside for varying reasons at the time when Raleigh Romero was frustrated with the business side of boxing. Now looking back, for the current WBA welterweight champion, believes it all worked out for the better. He said that he was battling depression the last more than 2 years. End quote. And I'm not going to get to anything else about this, the whole thing, and two-weight champion. And we have the fight in August next month. It gets him and Teofimo Lopez, that interestingly. Again, I really can't point that out. But when I do look at Raleigh Romero's last, again, 2 years, like from 2024, when you look up Raleigh Romero and his last moments of that, yeah, like, I could say that depression could get people out of line or something, but again, let's just look at it from a different perspective. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of the article because it's going to be long, and I'm only going to talk about the heavyweight title. But here's the thing about Raleigh Romero: the last 2 years was different. So let's go back 3 years on May of 2023. He defeats Ismael Barroso, which was a controversial win for the WBA. The WBA super lightweight champion. And he took on a guy named Isaac Cruz in March the next year, March the 30th. He was having problems in that fight and could not handle it in 8 rounds. Lost his second fight by knockout. And then September, I think maybe he was battling problems and depression, but he didn't have an effect against Manuel James in September when he fought in the T-Mobile Arena in 2024 in September, the same night where Canelo Saul Alvarez defeated Edgar Berlanga in his 8th title defense for his not undisputed, but his unified champions, a year before May when he defeated William Skull and then the whole Terrence Crawford thing. But yeah, that was the same night. And looking at the fight, I couldn't really say much about it, but I guess when he won against Ryan Garcia, maybe the fame got into him a lot more, but I couldn't say he had an effect. He's a tough fighter, but there is problems with his career as a whole. Yes, he's trained by Floyd Mayweather, but who knows how long that relationship's going to end up with him and Mayweather. Still. But all in all, his last pro fights are just simple without nothing going on. So I don't know. Like, there's nothing to argue about, but I can't really say for certain that it was a legit walk in the park. Again, like sometimes depression gets to you. Like Tyson Fury, people say that the depression for Tyson Fury's depression was all a hoax. I don't think that would be the case because like Tyson Fury did have a lot of depression in his career and life. I think what kept him going before the incident happened from his long hiatus is that I think his depression was getting a little bit worse at time, but he kept pushing it because his only one goal in life was to take on Vladimir Klitschko for the titles. That's what kept him together for a long time, to keep him together. He keeps fighting his life no matter how much of the pressure in life it was. And when he defeated Klitschko, where was he going to go? Again, when you look at him when he met Deontay Wilder in January 2016, after Wilder defeated Spilka, he went on. He put him on. He went on. He yelled on the mic, "I'll take you any place, anytime, anywhere. I'll fight you in your backyard like a Don Klitschko because you're a bum." He takes off his shirt. Both are clambering out, this or that. They're both arguing out in the ring. And that right there is historic there. Like, so you can think that Fury should have had another goal there, but again, he had the rematch with Klitschko, failed on drug in this, and yeah, it was. So I think there's a lot of problems there going on with him on the side, because I guess backstage was a lot more tougher than on stage, so we couldn't see that, but it felt raveled for what it was. And more news on Alexander Usyk and Deontay Wilder. I did not know about this. I think I did know about this. Yes, I actually read this. Forget it. Oh, forget about that one. Forget about that one. You know what? The last information I want to find is what is going on in the super bantamweight of boxing while we are trying to find who the perfect match is. So here's the thing. Naoya Inoue, from 2023, he wins, defends his title for the first time for Undisputed. Couple title defenses in 2024. Bonko of 4 of them in 2025. One just recently. He has 8 straight title defenses. He won't break off the record for the youngest boxer, but still, that's not the point. We've already, again, there is an article that was last June, which was the last information on Boxing Scene, and I'm going to read it here again. I think I've read it before, but I'm going to read it again, if I did. States that Hideyuki Osashi, the Ohashi Promotions, I respect him a lot, stated for promoter for the junior featherweight king Naoya Inoue, has alluded that his star charge will take on Jesse Bam Rodriguez in February, which is going to be next year. So if my calculations are correct, he's going to have another title fight maybe in September or recently in October, and maybe if he gets the better shape, depends on how his ninth title defense will be, he can fight anyone that can give him an opportunity, and he'll win the fight easily if it's going to be a knockout victory to get the fight on and go on and get Bam Rodriguez. Rodriguez is already champion, and he might as well fight another fight in early on because he already took care of his first opponent easily. So give him another fight and see if he can handle another win. And then when that happens, go up. Because, again, maybe Rodriguez should take it easy, because maybe if he is going to fight another bantamweight fight this year, the odds of him going up to super bantamweight is pretty tough. So again, but Ohashi did say on Yahoo Japan that Inoue will have a big fight in February, as he's sure that he can guess which one, which is the motion that once that's done, the next one will be an extraordinary place. And Rodriguez's coach, Robert Garcia, I have said before, has said the newly crowned WBA bantamweight champion will likely take another fight, potentially against Seiya Tsutsumi or Christina Medina before the end of the year, which I find that to be a good idea, because Bam Rodriguez can easily defeat Christine Medina. Tatsumi. Well, I will say this though. Tatsumi might not be a great fighter, but he is a tough person when it goes to long distances. He has fights with Diego. Well, I forgot that guy that he scored a split draw last year ago, which is one of the greatest fights I have to ever say, which I've never talked about before because I was completely blinded about it. But again, it just goes to show you there's a lot of interesting stuff there going on behind the scenes. But again, I do find this to be a great deal of success. I find this one to be something that could be worth watching because Inoue's 33-27 knockout against Rodriguez's 24-17 knockouts. They're on the knockout percentages, and even though decision-wise is different for Inoue's last pro fights, but I don't think that's going to be an effective for Inoue. If Inoue can handle good rounds against anyone else, even though the Nakatani fight gave him a great show, and even though Rodriguez has had some closeness in his career, so I don't find this to be a problem whatsoever. It's going to be an interesting fight nonetheless, and I do have a feeling we're going to see some great excitement in the world of boxing. And I think that's going to be something worth watching. Pretty much. Okay, so now with all that out of the way, let's get down to it. Let's go straight in. July the 11th, 2026, the IBA Pro 19 Saturday, live on Al Siesta of IB Challenger Promotion, Frank Warren on Queensberry Promotion, and John Wirt on Epic Sports Promotion, live in the VTB Arena in Moscow, Russia. We have it. Now, we don't got the full historical updates on the wins of competition yet, but what we do have are historical moments that are surprising for where it is. So the commentators and everyone has been pointing out greatness here from the legits of competition. We are seeing legitimacy all over the world today. We have multiple boxing fights going on here. We have great world champions, and we have future and past champions competing against each other, against the greatest of all boxers here. We have the greatest. With Garcia versus Peter Kadiru, with Kadiru from Germany giving another countryman a chance to get a German to be in the championship picture. Joe Joyce is trying to make his huge comeback as he's taking on Artem Saslenkov, which we believe might not be a legit fighter, but who knows. From Arslan Yalev, the person that got defeated last year ago against gold medalist Tony Yoka, who his opponent Joe Joyce, the silver medalist of the 2016 games, is fighting against another guy. He's taken on Murad Khalidov. Murad Khalidov, unfortunately, is 38 years old. His alias is Champion, but with 12-0, 6 knockouts. He did box since 2008, winning multiple fights, and in 2010, and won in 2010. And he was out of the boxing scene for a long time. He only came back a few years in 2014, nothing much, until 2025. He makes a comeback against Sergey Kuzmin, Jose Larduet, which I do know Jose Larduet. I know him as a decent fighter at the time, ever since his loss. He had mostly I have heard of him in his career at the time when he lost against Gergen Hovhannissian in 2019 in an amateur game, and Daniel Perot also twice in between those years. So I have heard about him, and he lost against Richard Torres in the Cup final of the Chemistry 2018 amateur champions as well. So that right there says a lot. But when looking at it from a perspective point, it says a lot when it comes to great deals of desire to understand the true meaning of this. So we have new boxers, we have past prime boxers, but how do we know they have a chance? How do we know there's opportunities? Heck, we even have 6-0 Muslim Gadjimagomedov taking on a guy named Kevin Martinez from Mexico, a 14-1 fighter who I don't know much other than he has fought for an IBO World Cruiserweight title in 2024 against Yevez Negabu. But again, that's all I know. So how good is Muslim going to do as a former WBA Bridgeweight champion? How is he going to fight his way through? Who knows? That's the beauty of it. So there's a lot to it to be desired from to understand the meaning of it. So I think that does show a lot of great deal to understand. But again, with all this being said, we don't got the information of any of these pro fights except the 2 fights that are serious today. So now we have to understand one thing. Where do we go from all of this going on? Because there should be something that we have to understand. Again, the real thing we have to be paying attention to, do we have anything to say of what Frank Warren was doing that night? Because I'm sure Frank Warren was telling them, hey, maybe we should put stuff together. Maybe we should have Frank Warren think that Joe Joyce is going to take over for, you guessed it, maybe Frank Warren should give Joe Joyce a chance to fight for the WBA championship. The problem is Joe Joyce is not ranked in boxing. But again, he could actually give an opportunity for anyone else, but he can't give it to Anthony Joshua because Anthony Joshua is not his promoter. It's Eddie Hearn, for crying out loud. And I'm sure he's jealous that he didn't put Tyson Fury in the picture because Fury is fighting another guy that's in the contendership. So it just makes you wonder. So we've already had talks, picture and such. As they're showing on competition, the first match on the show that is on record, Joe Joyce and Artem Soslenkov. With everything going on, Joe Joyce is pointing out the spectacular event in his career. It might not be over. There's talks of him coming back. And I will say, though, Joe Joyce's shape, the shape he was in that night, was different. Because Joe Joyce came in there, after his Derek Chisora fight in 2024, he weighed 281 pounds. And then he came out from his Filip Hrgovic fight in April the next year at 275. So I really can't say much about that. But now he's gaining back a record-breaking 289 pounds. A 6'6" giant at 80 reach advantage, 40 years old. He's 289 pounds. 289 pounds is ridiculous. Because when looking at that was crazy. I just saw his body proportion. Like, even though his body support could not be there, but I just did not see any of that length of understanding. I just didn't see that. It was just hard for me to believe the understanding of anyone else here. As for Soslenkov's shape is at 237. Now, people do say, does body shape or weight mean anything? Yes, you could get tired. Maybe your body, maybe the skinny you are, the more you can expose out your body proportion. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't really work out properly, and maybe it might happen dangerously to Zhang. Yes, Zhang was a big dude, but if he couldn't handle body punches on to Adjit Caballel, how could you not handle it to anyone else? So I think it just goes to show you it was a really tough thing. So Soslenkov comes in. He has his great promotion here. He's putting in all the works at 237 pounds. And even though he's a 6'1" fighter, so 5 inches under, not good for a height because that's similar to the Polish fighter that lost against Lawrence Okali a couple years ago for the WBC Bridgerweight title. When that guy was 6'1" and his reach advantage was not good. And his reach advantage was so bad, Lawrence Okali dominated him in the first round from the WBC Bridgerweight. So yeah, it was a tough call for me to understand. But Soslenkov, he used to weigh 255 pounds during his debuts in 2018, but started losing weight from 240 to 2019, then came in 2020 to weigh 230, took time off from 2021, and then 2022, the war happened, so... But he was still around his 230 pound. He was at 241 at one point last year against the Agron Smasitsky fight, so I don't really think there was much to it. The fight itself, I will say this though about the fight. The fight really gave me a little bit of problematics because the fight's in Russia. Joe Joyce is overweight. And again, I do find this to be an easy win for Soslenkov. But of course, Joe Joyce proved to everyone that he was still a tough, worthy opponent. From 10 rounds of boxing, I gave Joe Joyce round 1, round 2, round 5, barely round 5, and same as round 1, nothing much. Round 6, 7, great rounds. Round 9, barely round 9. For Seslenkov, round 3, round 4, his dominant round. And even going through round 8 and round 10. And those were hard rounds for Judge. So I had to fight 96 to 94 until the 11th round. That's how I judged the fight. It was all there for the punching abilities for what we were looking at. Because the fight started out so crazy for both guys, throwing punches. Seslenkov off his 5-inch reach advantage, just under. Joyce's body proportion was so massively big, he should have been a WWE wrestler, while Seslenkov was almost like this short little cruiserweight fighter that didn't belong in the ring. That's how ridiculous this fight was. This was a Russian David taking on a British Goliath. It was ridiculous. It was pretty ridiculous when looking at the fight. Again, both guys are throwing out mean punches to each other. There is some clinches going on, and around 40 seconds of the fight, it almost looked like when Joyce was clinching him, he was somewhat humping him for some weird reason, and I found that to be okay. But again, both guys were stunning out punches. Like, both were just laying off their left jabs as best they could. Seslenkov is trying his best to learn out his defensive approach, and I wouldn't really say Seslenkov was there, but even though this was for somewhat of a... I think someone said this was also for the WBA belt. Like the WBA... Someone called it the WBA Gold International Heavyweight title, which I just found. But again, the fight had moments for even stuff. Like one could trade punches against each other. One can throw this and the other could throw that. And it wasn't that anything was possible because it was mostly a work of feeling the process. So the rounds were just getting started for each guy, just throwing out punches. And it seemed like they were getting bruised in the first round. They sure did, because both guys were just coming straight in. Again, Joe Joyce is still working off a great 2-punch combination, sometimes body work. But again, sometimes they'll get clinches against each other and then holds. As for the referee's name, can't find information on who the referee's name is. I think they mentioned it on the who the referee's name was, but I couldn't really understand who his name was yet. What was the referee's name? Wait, does it show? The referee's name was... Wait. So the referee's... Give me a second. I'm trying to... Why is my mouse button not working? What the fuck? Why is my mouse button not working? Damn, I gotta get a new computer or something. It's already getting broken on me. Gustavo Padilla is the referee's name. I really can't say much about this referee other than just good luck with his performance. But again, I will say though, let me just grab my mouse here so I can hook it to my computer. All in all, the entirety of the fight and such were note-wise because there was nothing much I could write about the entire fight. The fight had their moments. Both fighters were shining. So the fight was even for what it was. I just guess the outcome of the fight at the end is what might have ended Joe Joyce, because Joe Joyce just took on an unknown figure that never took on any top prospect as an Olympian boxer. So seeing this fight ended the way it is pretty different. All right. But again, it is interesting. And by the way, there was a moment in the fight in the second round, I guess, because what's actually interesting, they actually had Gustavo, the referee, to wear this random set thing in the piece behind the back of a wiring behind his back of his head, and a device or something around here on his head. And they actually cut to a camera, which was the referee camera, which is similar than the referee camera from Halloween Havoc 1991, when they had a referee do a couple refereeing matches in that WCW show, calling it the referee cam, which is ridiculous. And they do cut to that, which is kind of ridiculous, just seeing close-up footage, but the movement, his head movement, was so boggling hard. It is kind of crazy. By the way, in the end of the second round, they do see Joe Joyce having a headlock on Suslankov. And then they showed us replay at the end of the second fight when both guys did clash their heads. So you can tell this was a dirty fight. They're punching, they're getting their heads collided. So it wasn't that it was a dirty fight. It was just accidental. So you can expect that to happen. And there's a moment, again, in the third round during the final seconds of the fight where Suslankov was clinching out with Joyce. So it wasn't like it was all that bad. But again, it wasn't that anything would have been possible. Like, both guys were on the cusping edge of... I just don't know how to explain it. I just really don't know how, because it was just seemed like the clinching was a problem. And after coming around 4 or so rounds, there were some facial bruises to Soslankov's face. And I almost thought that his ear was actually broke or something on his right ear, because his left ear didn't seem broken or something. So I almost thought maybe a bubble was coming out of Soslankov's ear for some reason, because his ear shape was different. Because, like, if you see my ear is so different than Soslankov's ear. I really thought he had a bubble growing, which is crazy. So I really expected something bad was happening. But again, everything was going on. Both guys were just bruising their faces for several rounds. And again, after 6 rounds of boxing, both guys were just putting on the pressure. And by the way, coming around the time to the end of the 5th round, they show us backstage footage of Peter Kadiru shadow boxing. They show Murat Gassiev boxing shadow boxing first. And you also have Kadiru shadow boxing with the German flag behind him and another flag that looked like a red flag with a white castle or something, which I didn't know what that was, but it seemed like an interesting flag. I don't know what that flag was. But yeah, they're getting ready. They're just shadow boxing while the cameras are looking at them. I guess they told them to wake up and start shadow boxing. We're doing this for live TV or something, because like, this is 2026 after all. And I guess they want to go back to the old days of professional boxing when they showed us backstage footage on HBO and Showtime Boxing, when they used to show backstage footage of people getting ready for the main event or something, which I don't think they do that anymore. But I am proud that Russia is actually doing that just to make things interesting. Of course, we do get to the 6th round where the referee is running around counterclockwise or clockwise multiple times. They show the ref cameras, what they call it, and he's running clockwise the whole way, and he's trying to keep his head straight while both Joyce and Soslankov are clinching. It was like 30 seconds. It was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds left of the 6th round. It was so... Oh boy, like when I try to look at it so closely to the camera, it was so hard for me to control my own movement, because at first it almost looks like you're getting a headache, because guys, sometimes when I take my cameras and start walking outside in the woods, when I used to film videos for my content of filming outside in the woods, sometimes my movements were bad because I started bouncing so much that my camera, it wasn't that good. So I know how it felt. So it was crazy. But again, by the end of round 6, everything was just coming out that way. Like, Soslankov's face was sort of bruised on. He had a little bit of a nail right here. Joe Joyce's face, I couldn't really tell by his face, because I guess they didn't cut to the ring side to him as much. But there were some bruises moments here or there. Again, both guys are throwing on each counter punches as best they could, swinging for the fences. It's like no defensive. Like there were defenses of covering. It's not like misfits boxing where defensive is a problem. They just throw punches and clinching and they don't care about doing this or that. It's like watching two girls in a strip club fighting and they're just swinging and it's just so terrible. There's just no, it's just a cat fight thing. So, but it's nothing like that. But again, both guys are just headbutting around the trains against each other the entirety. And for the next several rounds, because by the end of round 7, it seemed like things were changing. Both guys were just clinching and grabbing, and again, both were evening up the fight. So again, it was an even fight for me to give out one round for each guy. And again, both were having the facials and everything else for the bruisedness. I couldn't tell by the blood. And again, there was a moment in round 8 where there was a perfect grab of a clinch right there for Joyce and then blocked twice, blocked by Soslenkov, and then sets up a right perfect and sets up another one here or there. Like, there was some interesting defensive work there for Soslenkov. Don't get me wrong. And again, Joyce was still putting out the work. There was a moment when Artem did put his head down and Joyce tried to headlock him in this position when his head was way down. So, but again, in boxing, there's a lot of boxing strategies for that. Like, I'm not saying it's legal because it's not, but again, it's not dangerous to think about it. And I think that was the 9th round. And by the way, when we come to the 10th round, we see Manny Pacquiao and I think Derek Chisora. Both of them are holding gloves to each other. They're both hugging each other on camera on ringside. And there's a couple other people talking in the background. And I think the commentators say it, but I don't know who it is. So Slenkov's cheek right here is already turning off to a red formation here for some reason. And I was looking at both of his ears and I realized none of them are swelled up. That's just how his ears looked like. And again, the bell starts and they just both walk towards each other and start punching and clinching. Again, it wasn't an entertaining fight, but I wasn't expecting the fight to go by knockout because after this, I really thought the fight was going to go the distance. Again, both guys were just swinging for the fences, every single punch for clinching and such, both butting each other with their arms. And the referee was just having enough. He was warning them so much. And I can't blame the referee for this as much because, again, him running around on the camera and he's turning his body. Like, looking at the referee's perspective is so crazy. And I think they also showed it during the when Murat Gassiev did the semifinals for the Muhammad Ali Cup for that 12th round knockout win before his Usyk fight in the finals. Also showed that as well, which is crazy. They also had another referee that had a camera as well. Again, Joe Joyce's eyes, I can't tell if his eyes are squinged or something, but bruised. Again, they come into the 11th round, and at this moment, Joyce, in my opinion, again, was winning 6 rounds to 4. Only Soslenkov would have to win the last 2 rounds, depending on how I believe what was close. Again, I couldn't tell much of Joe Joyce's face because of his skin color. No offense. But there were times that his eyes were squinged, but that's how he looked. But again, they come into the 11th round and the fight ends like this. They take the punches, they clinch, break it up, and again, Soslenkov working on his own formation here. He goes for body punches downstairs and then swings upstairs. And again, he's putting out every single work of motion. He's putting out everything. He is doing everything. He's pushing back Joyce. Joyce is trying to land some punches. He's doing a good job keeping the fight together. Depending on what the judges were scoring, he was putting in a good work. So that's what he did. He comes in. He throws in some great body work and handles himself pretty well. And I didn't see nothing wrong with Joyce because it seemed like he was going to go through this 12-round fight and end it. Because I really thought he was going to win the fight. At this moment, both are tired. I didn't see nothing wrong with Joyce. I wasn't listening to the commentators talking. I was just paying attention to the fight, so I don't know what they were talking about. But yeah, with 1 minute and 40 seconds left of the fight, both of them are just dancing next to each other. They're just, flicking jabs here, there, and then they start throwing out punches. 10 seconds later, finally, Soslankov throws a couple punches, lands them perfectly. Joyce isn't getting a lot of stuff done. And then Soslankov just throws multitude of wild punches, connects it away. And again, this fight might not have been entertaining as much, but it was a close fight and might have been dirty, but man, these fighters had it. And then at the moment of 1 minute 17 seconds left of the fight, with Soslankov throwing everything, Joyce was actually trying to grab out his arms, but Soslankov got away with it and then threw a couple. And then after Soslankov landed a right and then a left, Joe Joyce does the unthinkable. No mas, the Roberto Duran moment. As he backs up, Soslankov goes forward. 1 minute and 11 seconds left of the 11th round. Coming to it. This isn't a 15-round fight. There is no 15 rounds. And surprisingly, Joe Joyce just puts his arm like this and says, no mas. I'm sure he didn't say that, but you get the point. He takes his glove and goes, no mas. What? We have 1 round left to the end of this fight. What do you mean, no mas? He puts his hands like this, and the referee is going forward, not knowing what's going on, but Soslankov, he thinks that he's tricking him. I'm sure they think that Joyce was tricking him, and it's ridiculous. I don't know what to say. Ridiculous or not, the referee is thinking he doesn't want it anymore, but Soslankov is not buying it, so he throws out a left, and then Joyce blocks himself here to throw a huge right, and another left, another right, another left. And they then cut to the referee camera, I call it the referee camera, and it just sees Joe Joyce's face mangled from here to his face. He doesn't know what's going on. He pushes straight to his face, and Joe Joyce saying it over and over again, no mas. His face, his eye glazed here from his eye. You can see the close-up on his face from the referee camera. He didn't want it more. He repeatedly said, no mas. With 1 minute left of the 11th round. Joe Joyce, in my opinion, was winning this fight, and he quits it like he just let his country down. Dude, even though Tony Yoka might have let his country down, even though their own soccer team from France is still in the FIFA World Cup as we speaking, and they're putting every single work into it, and Tony Yoka gets his back injury because of a kid stabbed his foot by accident. And now this, like, you even have England in the Final Four of the FIFA World Cup, and Joe Joyce has an opportunity for a champion here, and he gives up on life. He fought against a guy that barely had good heavyweight competition. So Soslankov has some great skills to himself, but not the best. But he defeats an Olympic fighter that he might have not deserved. I don't know what to say about that. It's the worst type of utter understanding. Like, it's ridiculous. Either way, the fight ends. Joe Joyce walks up to Soslankov, raises his hands, they hug it out. By the looks of Joyce, I think you can already tell the 40-year-old fighter, I just see it. It just seemed like he just didn't want it no more. And looking at the person behind him out on the stage, yeah, I think you can tell it was pretty tough. And even though you can almost say you can disqualify Artem Soslankov for what he did, but again, in that situation, what would you think if Joe Joyce was tricking him? He was just trying to manipulate him, and Soslankov didn't want none of it. Sometimes you can see those people do that crazy stuff of no mas, no mas. But again, this moment, when I saw that at the time, was the most ridiculous thing I've ever saw. I never expected something like that before. I was never born in 1980 to watch the Roberto Duran and the Sugar Ray Leonard 2 fight. I never did. I was born in 98, months before the Maine Black Bears won their final college NCAA champion in 1999 with their coach who had passed away a couple years later, helping them to win 2 NCAA hockey championships. And I was only a few months old, and I never saw that. I never witnessed a final match against the Maine Black Bears in any NCAA Division I, mind you, or none of the other divisions. That right there. But me witnessing something like this is the most wild historical moment in history. At the end of the day, it is a surprising victory for everyone here to watch, but man, it sure got me. Like, even though I didn't want Joe Joyce to win, but when you look at it from a perspective point, you do got to give him credit. Like, again, Joe Joyce came into the pros so late in his career. And even though Deontay Wilder came into the pros a lot later as well, but the thing was, Deontay Wilder was born in October of 85. Joe Joyce was born in September, 1 month before Wilder was born. And Wilder started boxing a lot later in his career than Joyce. And even though Wilder said, forget about it, he wants to go pro. And he earned opportunity and got title shots and won before he was in his 30-year-old. So, yeah, that right there says a lot. So now we have to come into it for the fight for the heavyweight champion. And again, now looking at the name again, Gustavo is going to be the referee for the main event. Gustavo might have handled 11 rounds in his fight against those two guys. Now he has to do another 12-round fight for the WBA World Heavyweight Champion. Now, they don't call this the Super Heavyweight Champion, which I'm assuming maybe they aren't going to because the Super Heavyweight is vacated, and now they're thinking they're going to make it a primarily a WBA champion. So they don't call it as a world champ, but they are counting as Murat as a legit champion. He is being promoted to the real WBA champion. Even though if it's not super, it's nothing much. Peter Kadiru, I have talked about before, is a guy that I find to be a bum. Why do I say Peter Kadiru from Germany is a bum? Well, this is the reason why. You see, when looking at it from my perspective, Peter Kadiru, he had a lot of formality problems in his time. He sure did, because he had some wins. He was a WBC vacant world heavyweight champion against 11-1 fighter Thomas Salak in January of 2020. And you would think that'd be great. He was the BDB German champion when he took on a 6-0 fighter and retained it and went on to do interesting moments by the end of 2021. In 2022, he took on a couple undefeated fighters with both 2-0 records just to take on another journeyman fighter named, again, he was taking on other journeyman fighters that I do know, such as Adnan Redzovic, Muhammad Ali Dermez, I know him. And again, he had interesting moment against Juan Torres, which I have heard of Juan Torres before, the guy that lost against guys like Kristen Penga last year in January and Alexander Flores that same year, and Andrei Novitsky as well, and a guy named Norman Neely, who was supposed to be a promising heavyweight in the USA. So I have heard that Peter Kadiru had some interesting moments. But then when he took on a guy named Marcus Antonio in Germany, who Marcus was a guy that was living in and born in the country of Argentina, came in and scored a first-round knockout in Hamburg, Germany, defeating the German in his country by first-round KO at 56 seconds. When I heard about that just this year, it was the worst. Now, I know what you're saying. Peter Kadiru did come back from that, defeating Jacob Sosnitsky, who was another promising fighter I have seen. That was a journeyman. Victor Emilio Ramirez. El Scuch, a 22-1 fighter. And they were both IBF Intercontinental Heavyweight title fights. He also took on Osasu Otobo, who actually lost against some decent fighters of Yumat Kamkiran and Teramoana. But again, these fights were bad. And Sanad Gashi last May, he fought against, his last fight was a hard win for him. So, and even though this is this is actually one of his first few times he would ever leave the country of Germany, he did went to the USA at one point against the Juan Torres in June of 2019, went to fight someone else in March 2022 in another country. When in April, he came in the UK O2 Arena after his defeat. So this was his fourth time out of Germany, so it wasn't common for him to box in other countries. So I guess it made sense why this fight happened, but again, it was bad. Again, the weight differential was different. Peter Kadiru, he came in at 257 and a quarter, 229 and 3/4 for Mirat Gassiev. Yeah, he was 29 years old out of a 31-year-old Gassiev. Gassiev's height differences didn't really matter. Both heights were different. Probably a tiny inch better than Peter, but again, it didn't matter. The entire fight was a complete squash. Like, even though this guy had some weeks' notice after Tony was injured, but the fight only had moments to be desired. Again, they do show us great referee footage, whatever you like to call it. And again, both were just dealing with punches. Like, the first round of the fight wasn't much. Both were dealing out with easy punches here or there. There wasn't a lot of crazy stuff happening. The last 30 seconds of the fight, there was moments when Mirat was putting in some work here or there, and then Peter Kadiru would come in and start laying out a little bit of a punch once in a while. So it wasn't, but again, he wasn't throwing a lot of punches, and Gassiev was doing most of the work of getting some punches connected to his glove, so it wasn't all terrible. But again, he managed to hold himself together just in the mid-rounds, because even though Peter Kadiru was doing okay, keeping his hands up, he was still exposing his belly, so it wasn't much of a fight there. But again, he was ranked in the top 15 of WBA at one point, but not at this moment. But again, Mirat Gassiev did an okay job keeping himself together. He was working on great punches here or there. Every time he was even trying to put his hands up for Kadiru, he would go for the body. He would go for here or there. It was an easy fight. It wasn't much to talk about. There were some times that maybe a punch might have hit the belt line of Peter Kadiru, but the referee didn't question it. He didn't tell them to stop. There was a moment, there was another body punch in that second round that would have been below the belt or on the belt line where Peter hit him after Gassiev hit a couple. But again, the referee didn't say nothing about it. So who knows? But again, the fight was there. Peter was on the rope line so much in some of the fights of the entire round. It was just ridiculous. Like, he was getting outboxed, he was getting outpushed, and he was in a tough situation for most of the fight. And even though Mirat was looking for his opportunity, there was a moment at 1 minute 45 seconds left of the third round that he started putting out the left punch and then took the left glove away from Peter and landed a perfect punch on his left, and then gone from uppercuts and other multitude punches, backing him to a corner. So Peter, even though he was doing okay on his defensive work as best he could, his offensive just wasn't there. I just don't think he had it. And if he did have an undefeated record of 24-0 from the Marcus win, if he did defeat Marcus without not getting demolished, who knows what the outcome was? And it's kind of weird that the odds of that happened, that Richard Torres losing against Frank Sanchez off a second round victory in Giza last year goes crazy. You can't say that much about anything else, but there was a lot to it to be said. Again, there's a lot to be desired from, in my opinion. It wasn't like all of this was going downhill, but again, I really can't say that there's a lot to be talked about. Now, the fourth round was the best round for Peter Kadiru. I would have to say the fourth round might have been one of the best rounds of the entire fight for him as a close fight. Like, he was putting on some great jabs here or there in the fight. Again, Gassiev had moments of throwing punches, and then Peter would finally trade a punch here or there. There was a moment with only 2 minutes left of the round that he did finally try to get off a good jab, and then a right here or there. And he was collected out some jabs and a great good wet uppercut here or there. So Peter managed to handle himself good in the fourth round to finally put some offensive work against Gassiev, even though Gassiev managed to try to block out punches as best he could. So the fourth round was actually a pretty entertaining round for what it was. Don't get me wrong. Again, in the fifth round, he started to land out some good two-punch combinations and another back here or there. And both him and Gassiev were just trading punches, but Gassiev was doing the better. And he was still pushing Kadiru to the ropes. I think there was a moment he was pushing him to the ropes in the fourth, I guess. Again, Kadiru wasn't on the offensive. He was just getting outboxed. It was just tough. Again, he was throwing out some punches here or there. He was laying on some punches on Gassiev, but they weren't power punches to begin with. So it was tough. And then we come to the sixth round where all things changed. I gave every round for Gassiev, even though the fourth round was close, but better for Gassiev. And Gassiev is dancing around, bobbing his head as always, comes in, and then we get a little bit of a fast pass, four-punch combination from Kadiru, and I almost thought he might have elbowed Gassiev at one point. Like, he threw the left punch, but almost got him elbowed at one point, which they were both close to their heads at one point. But Kadiru managed to push him on a little bit, but Gassiev was pushing him so much that there was just nothing left for him. He was running away, going from clockwise to rope. He was going corner to corner. That's all he was doing the entire fight. And the referee just had enough of it. He just couldn't see it anymore. And with only 2 minutes left of the fight, neither Kadiru's trainer didn't want to see it anymore. He's throwing out multitude of punches, of uppercuts to the corner. And then the camera, before the camera cuts to the referee cam, I could have sworn I might have saw Kadiru's trainer waving a towel just off the corner here until they cut to the referee camera. And I guess the referee camera saw it. So, well, the referee, not the camera. So he steps in, pushes Gassiev. And then as it goes to the referee camera, you see a guy coming in the middle out of the ring, waving his towel to stop the fight, to save Kadiru's life, to give the protection to save Peter from more damage, giving Murat Gassiev his first title defense for the WBA heavyweight championship. And whether you call it the regular champion, which still might be, it's still a legit major belt. What an amazing win for Gassiev here, even though this wasn't the fight he wanted. But you know what? You got to do what you got to do to make money, and that is what it's like. Peter Kadiru, even though he did much better losing this fight more than his first pro loss, he went in there, he tried to put some rope-a-dopes on Muhammad Ali, this or that, but Murat Gassiev knew better, and that's all I can say. It was a good fight for Gassiev. It was a much better fight than the first fight. And even seeing Manny Pacquiao out next to him with Gassiev and them holding the belt, it was actually a great historical moment. And looking at Gassiev's face and the look on his face, because when looking at Gassiev's face as they're announcing the winner of the fight at 1 minute of the fight, he's just looking down his face, and I'm sure he has white hair and such. He has white beard, and he's already becoming an old man at this moment. But again, he's not even in his mid-30s yet. And after 15 years since he boxed, let me look up how he boxed in 2011, correct? By the way, they also called him the first ever Armenian fighter because he actually moved to Armenia during the Ukrainian war, but now he's back in Russia. So take that for what you will. But yeah, he's 32 years old, fought for 15 years in boxing. He's looking at himself, looking down, and he looks at himself. He does look at himself there. Like he's looking down after 15 years, after all the hard state work, losing against a couple fighters that he might have regret, from the fights of Alexander Usyk to Otto Wallin, to come back from his Kubrat Pulev fight of how he was getting obliterated in that fight, wins that fight by 6-round knockout, to this fight. I would have to say this was actually one of his most proudest moments, in my opinion. He might have not become undisputed cruiserweight champion, but man, looking at the look on his face, I could say to myself, Murat Gassiev, if Alexander Usyk wasn't in this era, he would have been maybe an undefeated fighter. Or maybe Marius Briedis from Latvia, he would have been an undefeated fighter instead. He would have been, if Alexander Usyk was not in this era of boxing. Both of those guys would have crushed boxing forever if it wasn't for Usyk. So I'm not going to say they're terrible. These guys went in there and proved themselves as a work of great competition. And they proved it. And I can say to myself that these guys have put themselves in the fire of greatness. Like, Marius Briedis did try his best to make back champions as best he could. And Murat Gassiev tried to make comeback after comeback in his career. Like, he comes back in 2020 after his defeat 2 years ago against Usyk, defeats Nuri Safiri, defeats Michael Walsh in 2021. Then he leaves his country of Russia to go to Armenia. He fights in another country in August of 2022 to become the EBP champion in Serbia. And then takes on Mike Balogun in March in Armenia, which was one of the fighters that we've talked about. He lost against Otto Wallin, which meant his career went back down. But he came back. He took on Kem Lundquist, Jeremiah Milton in 2025 in the USA, to Dubai against Kubrat Pulev, and yeah, he comes back with this. So all in all, and even though his last remaining fights, like his last 8 victories right now have all went by knockout, or his last 10 wins were all by knockout. Even though his 2 defeats have came by decision, he's done a great job doing what he was meant to do. And I have to say for certain, that's legit. So all I could say is he actually proved himself as a legit fighter and a great competitor in boxing. And that right there says a lot. So I hope Murat Gassiev has, in my opinion, maybe 5 more years left in boxing. I have a feeling Murat Gassiev might retire until 2031 and maybe in his mid-30s. And I would say good luck to him. So yeah, that's all I'm going to have to say about this entire episode. Thank you for watching this. Congratulations. Good luck for Artem Saslankov if he has what it takes to make it forward in the world of boxing here. I wish him best of luck. The rankings on the entire board here are not that much to talk about. And even though rankings on everything else from nothing else, there's not a lot of interesting things happening here. But by the way, the IBF rankings on July the 9th did consist. Brandon Moore is out of the rankings, and Jarrell Miller is ranked number 15 in the IBF. On July the 10th, the WBO updated their rankings, but nothing has changed. All of it's the same. As for Gassiev, he is WBA World Heavyweight Champion. The WBA Super World Heavyweight Champion is still vacant, but they might promote him to that if the WBA comes back. I think the WBA Super Heavyweight Champion might be a legit. They might get rid of the regular belt, or they might bring back the regular belt as the original title because it is original. And the Super WBA belt might be gone. Who knows because of this. So we might see some interesting changes here for boxing. But with that being said, we'll have to wait for the update next time. And with that being said, see you next time.